Okay, Gary, which camera do I look at? Just any camera. I wore my Winnipeg Jets Indigenous sweater today.
To be combative.
Just to show you guys how to do it things right.
Hey.
We started doing, like, the Winnipeg Jets started doing the Indigenous stuff probably about 7 years now. Yeah, it's been 7 years. So we're a partner with that, our festival, and we help program some of the artists. And they gave me a nice jersey.
We are live.
All
Just
right.
letting you know. So thanks everyone who's joining us online. Hello, Elaine. Hello, Lace. Anybody else who wants to join? This is Alan Greyeyes, who traveled all the way in from Treaty 1 territory.
Yes.
And you're from Treaty 1. Where are you from?
I grew up in Winnipeg, but my mom's from Saugeen and my dad's from Peguis.
So Alan came in to the Eastern provinces because the Juno nominees are going to be announced tomorrow in Toronto and Toronto.
I actually just came in because my wife was coming in, and she said, "Why don't you join me?" She's the one that she's the reason I can work in the arts.
But like any good manager, you're looking for other things to kind of like,
Yeah, lots of meetings.
on.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I've got a mix of stuff for our Sageway Festival, but also the Indigenous Music Office.
Okay, yeah, and you know what? So why don't you just let us know as we get going all the things that you do as a manager?
Well, I'm just more of I call myself a music industry helper. I don't like the word manager. It's more possessive. I don't possess anyone. I'm the festival director for the Sageway Festival in Winnipeg. We're a nonprofit organization, very small. I'm the only one that works in it. We have an annual round dance now in January. We do a partnership with the Winnipeg Jets to increase Indigenous arts presentation with their Indigenous Night. We have the Sageway Festival in June, which is 3 days, sometimes 4 days of mostly free programming to give Indigenous and newcomer families in Winnipeg's core and North End access to the arts. I actually heard at a conference a number of years ago, Dr. Sarah Diamond, and I don't know where she is now. She's at OCAD. Okay, yeah. She mentioned the idea that, when you don't have access to fresh foods and vegetables, like your physical health suffers. But same goes when you don't have access to the arts, your mental health suffers. And so I took that as a sign that we should be helping Indigenous and newcomer families that don't have access to the arts, giving them access to the arts. And so that's what we do at the Sageway Festival. We also have outreach concert series that runs mostly in July and August and into September. And then for September, October, November, we partner with the SOCAN Foundation to produce the Indigenous Song Camp here at the Kilometer Music House. We helped a bit with the new Reverie Indigenous Music Residency with CBC Music. And then I help out with the National Music Center's Indigenous Residency in Calgary, Alberta, too. And so, it's a lot of work. It's really fun. Like I said, I just want to help. I think that's my role, is being a music industry helper and going into meetings and learning about resources and sharing them with the community.
Well, first of all, Nyogwa, thank you for coming. Hey, we really appreciate you making the effort. Because Alan, had to rent a car from Toronto because otherwise you can't get to the res.
I had to learn how to drive.
That's right, drive in the snow. He knows how. But also, I wanted to say, as a helper, you're with the Indigenous Music Office and you're the incoming chairperson.
Well, I volunteered to be the chairperson. I think the AGM is next week, and so it's not official yet. I just volunteered. So I do like the idea of the national, like having a national industry association for Indigenous folks working in music. So it's not just musicians. It's also people on the admin side. Right. And we've got a lot of stuff on the horizon. So.
Well, I wonder if that's where we want to start. Maybe we want to bring Branton in because Branton, what's his last name? Thoroldsson?
Thoroldsson, yeah.
Thoroldsson is going to be joining us on a Zoom link, and he's actually a staff person at the Indigenous Music Office, and he might want to give us a spiel.
I don't know if he's on the Zoom at all. No.
Not till 6.
Yeah, he's got another hour.
Oh, not till 6:30. Never mind. Okay, so he can chill for another 50 minutes. But also, so if we have, here's the drill. We've got people joining online who can pose questions, and I hope people can hear me. Just give me a sign, anyone who's online, that you can hear us and that you're connected and everything. But also, if you have questions here, this is the karaoke mic. So you can ask a question, because we do want to hear what your question is for Alan. So you have to just ask for the mic and I'll throw it over to you.
Sure. With the Indigenous Music Office right now, we're running the Cultural Cadence program. January is a participant. There's 9 other participants from across the country. The idea is to help them build business relationships and not understand, but I guess connect with mentors that can help them navigate the music industry. And then it'll be capped off with a trip to Vancouver ahead of the Juno Awards. And so they're going to be meeting with a bunch of different people throughout the week and then attending a lot of the networking events that are taking place with the Junos. And I believe like the Junos is one of the best networking opportunities in the music industry every year, but like in Canada specifically, because like you go to all those conferences and stuff, and there's no guarantee that you're going to meet a lot of managers, agents, record label folks. It's mostly like you go to conferences. It's a lot of like music festivals, which is really great. But I think at the Junos, you have a mix of everybody. And so I always look forward to the Junos. I'm not going to go this year, but it's like I said, it's a wonderful opportunity to network and get to connect and reconnect with people that you haven't met before, but also build a lot of bridges and inroads. And so the group's going to be out there. I think they arrive on the Sunday. They hit the ground running on Monday with a bunch of meetings and presentations that they're participating in. And it's anywhere like, I don't know what's confirmed yet. I know that I've just given them a bunch of contact information and recommendations. And so, there's a lot going on.
Okay. Elaine just can't hear, Gary, so I'm just... Okay. Okay. Yeah, Lacey can hear, and Elaine is just, I don't know. We'll see if we can get her to go to her audio settings and see if we can get her connected. But so thank you again for coming. And what we wanted to do is kind of like the last time Elaine was here, actually, home, which was for a sad occasion. Her father had passed. But, you go out and you have breakfast and you start talking, and the ideas started to flow around getting a bit of a, I don't know, what we'd call it, like a co-op or some kind of like base here on 6 to support the Native musicians and the other people who do event production and this sort of thing. Because why don't we all just get together and help each other and share resources and things like that? So this is very timely, Alan, that you should be coming out, even though it's because your wife came out and you just followed her out here.
Yeah, that's it. What I'm told.
Well, but the fact that you've been doing that for a long time now. So like in our community, what we're talking about, like what would be one of the first things that you would recommend for us to get going? How do we get going with that?
Yeah, that really reminds me of how it all started in Manitoba. Like, I think it was Errol Ranville that convinced the province of Manitoba to launch an Indigenous music program or Aboriginal music program at the time with Manitoba Music. And so from there, we had the Aboriginal Music Host Committee, which became the organization that I run now, which is Aboriginal Music Manitoba. And then we also had the Manitowabi Festival come out of there. So it started with like nonprofit organizations, nonprofit corporations. And that's how we were able to organize and create job opportunities, but also performance opportunities and networking opportunities and development programs. I started with Manitoba Music in 2005. I was thrown into there really quickly. And I think, Gail, you might have been there for the first AMP camp as well. Back in 2005, 2006, it was a rough week. Like it was kind of like they asked me to run that program like probably about 2 months into working there. And I had no idea what to do. All I knew is that the Canada Council was giving them some money to do this week-long residency that they had envisioned. It was Jerry Trimble's vision, and I was just the one that was left to do all the admin work and details. And so it was really tough. It might have been great for you. It was tough for me. I think I remember that first group too. Like we were all just starting out, and there was a lot of people that liked to sleep in. So I remember part of my job each morning was going around knocking on doors, reminding them, hey, we were going to do some workshops today. We have panel discussions starting right away. And so, but as the years went by, like I think like that program became very strong. The Indigenous Music Residency is what it became, a week-long residency. And we saw like folks like Jeremy Dutcher come out of there. And I remember, I don't know if I should tell this on camera, but I remember seeing his application and it wasn't very good. Like, Jeremy Dutcher is now, like, he's incredible. Like he's won Polaris Music Prize twice. But his photo wasn't very impressive. I'm just glad I wasn't the one like adjudicating all the applications. I didn't pick the people. It was other people that picked them. They definitely picked Jeremy because he was awesome. And like we did performance coaching every night. And so his performance coaching one started. It was him on the piano. And right that moment he started, he knew it was special. And our group of presenters or a group of instructors that year included Guillaume Decoufle, who ended up managing him. So Guillaume at the time was managing A Tribe Called Red, which we all know as the Hallucination now. And he saw Jeremy there. Funny enough, though, I think it took about a year to convince Guillaume to actually manage Jeremy. I don't think it was because of the art. I think it was just because Guillaume was busy at the time. And the other person we had there was Mauricio Ruiz, who I was just mentioning, the manager's playbook. He was there. He was managing Jesse Reyes at the time. And so we had this wonderful experience. It was at the Falcon Trails Resort. The idea behind the residency is we take people outside of the city of Winnipeg. And so you're stuck. You're stuck to just focus on music. It was really great. Another funny story about that is that because it was called Amp Camp, Dreezus, who was a rapper, he thought we were actually camping. And so he showed up with like a sleeping bag and a bunch of canned goods. He was like, I don't want to be hungry. I brought a bunch of canned beans and stuff. So it's like, man, you know what? We've got a chef out there. We've got like, they're making big meals every like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You have a hot tub in your cabin. Like, yeah, you're not roughing it by any means. So
how long did Amp Camp run for?
Oh, I think it went 2005 or 2006 till about, I guess like 2017 was the last time I ran it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I think like it just changed a bit afterwards. Like my strength was like I was able to do funding applications. And I think like that's not a skill that everyone has. And so when the new folks came in, I think it was just a little bit more challenging to do all the programming, all the planning, and the funding applications. And so, and plus like the support staff changed for the Manitoba Music throughout the years as well. And so like I feel like I had a lot of support when I was there too. And so I was able to raise enough money to make the project a little bit bigger than we had originally envisioned.
I mean, I went to Amp Camp one year, and I'm even a poet. So, but
that's
I went.
Right.
I went because I wanted to, kind of up my performance skills. And I was working with music at the time, like I was recording my poetry with music, and I made an album. I made a few albums and poetry albums, and everybody, David Deliri's in the house. He's in the online house,
nice.
So we say
that's
hello.
Awesome.
Hi, David. But anyway, that was like an amazing thing. So nothing has taken the place of Amp Camp since.
Well, we have partnerships with, like I said, the SOCAN Foundation with the Indigenous Song Camp. And it's wonderful. It's an opportunity for, I think, 10 artists from across the country.
How do they apply? They have to go through SOCAN?
SOCAN Foundation has the online application. I'm meeting with them tomorrow to chat about the details. It's usually September or October. We had like Tia Wood came through, Ace Anabi, Sebastian Gaskin. It's a wonderful week. And everyone gets kind of mixed around and matched. So they have one top liner, they have one musician and one music producer in every session. And so the idea is they get together for about 3 hours in one of the studios at the Kilometer Music House, and they write a song. And so it's been pretty awesome, like the last couple of years. I think like co-writing and songwriting is super important. Most of the music industry associations in Canada focus on business development. And so what we're like, good music matters the most. And I think that's what we're missing when it comes to our organizations and opportunities here in Canada is we're missing those co-writing opportunities. So it's, so that we have the Song Camp. We have like CBC last year just launched the Reverie Indigenous Music Residency, which I think was 4 weeks. And so We to Say was a part of it. Raven Reed
Where does that happen? Toronto?
It's in Toronto, yeah. So they work with mentors and music producers that are in the CBC, I guess, stable there. Oh. And so it just looked like an incredible opportunity. I didn't get a chance to go. I got COVID the last week when everything was happening. So there was the song camp, there was the Reverie wrap up, and then there was the Toronto Music Festival all at the same time. But I got COVID, so I had to cancel. But hopefully they all align again this year. And I think maybe that's what we can work on during the meetings this week is trying to align all of them, because just getting Indigenous people together, I think, is super important. And seeing Red, you guys do that awesome with Casa Loma. I really want to go out to one of those events, so get me in the loop. Awesome. Yeah, because it's like, I always like, whenever we do a program, I always include like a little survey for the applicants. And I ask them to identify their number one priority. And it doesn't matter from songwriting to like business development and export. I think the number one goal for most artists across the country is just meeting other Indigenous artists. And so if we can like build artistic networks, I think that's super important.
Ray, would you mind to tell us about the Casa Loma series?
Yes. So for 12 weeks, throughout 12 weeks in the summer, I believe it's usually starting around June, they do the Summer Sunset concerts at Casa Loma. And Seeing Red is just trying our best to incorporate more Indigenous artists. So my job here is try to find some.
That's awesome.
Yeah, right. Last year, Tia Wood was there, William Prince, Logan Stotts, I think that, and Derek Miller and Lacey performed.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was our first time. We kind of joined forces with them kind of at the tail end of it. So we're hoping this year we're at least to have one Indigenous performer of each week. Oh, good. So 12.
Yeah, I think like in the role I play with like advocacy and championing Indigenous folks, I just try to convince everyone to like, if you're in Canada, and especially if you're receiving public support like grants, you definitely have to have at least one Indigenous person on your stage. That goes with like concerts, festivals, music award shows, conferences, anything. I think like it's ridiculous that we're not represented in our home territory. Yeah. Like they need to include us on every stage.
At least one.
Yeah, at the very least, yeah. And I think that's why I'm also a big champion for the Indigenous categories at the Juno Awards. Like those categories guarantee that we see at least one perspective from an Indigenous nation on that stage every year. And now we have two categories. We have the traditional and the contemporary. And so there's two chances to hear an Indigenous language or a message from like an Indigenous nation on that stage. And they're really important messages. Like I remember also, I'm kind of calling out Guillaume right tonight or today, but I remember we had a good debate at Folk Alliance a number of years ago, because it was me and Guillaume. We went for lunch, and Jeremy Dutcher came with us, and Guillaume was just like, I'm not a big fan of music award shows. And I just tried to make the case that, you know what, this, like if Jeremy gets on that stage, it's an opportunity for him to thank the people that have put him in that position, to thank the people who have invested in his career, or, you know, bought him music lessons, or held his hand while he needed support and got him through the tough times. That's an opportunity to thank everyone. And I'm also a believer that those award shows tell stories that our words can't. Like they tell people how important that person is and why they should include them and why they should buy their merch and attend their concerts. And so I think the award shows are really important.
Like right now, we've seen a few of the award shows go bust. There's no more CAMAs. There used to be CAMAs. There used to be the Summer Music Awards, Indian Summer Music Awards. I don't think that's around anymore. But Manitowabi, you still do the
They don't do the awards either.
Interesting.
I love the CAMAs.
I
missed the Skydome Powwow.
Oh, yeah.
That was the best weekend.
Yeah.
I was Gary actually took me for a tour of Six Nations before we started, and we were just reminiscing on the CAMA days. You might be too young to remember. Yeah,
and then they had the performances at Hamilton Place, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
was like one of our bigger theaters in Hamilton, close by at the time. But I wanted to just talk about those awards, but also the importance of how can you say the industry backline that's so important to the performer's livelihood. And here's an example. So I used to write music reviews for BC Musician magazine. And of course I was reviewing native music albums and things, which I love doing. I love writing. I love talking about native music. I do it all friggin' day long, which is why I went into radio. But I was also reviewing powwow albums.
Wow.
And people are going, how do you review a powwow album? And I'm like, well, you listen for how tight they are. You listen, you can feel the spirit in that song or, the group itself. And I just thought that was so important because the general reader of that magazine was a non-native reader. Yeah. And so I was able to introduce, all of these contemporary and traditional musicians. And it just made me think when you talked about the separation or the splitting off of the Juno Award being the contemporary award and the traditional award, because you can't even pit both genres against each other.
Well, and you can't really put throat singing against powwow or fiddle music either, so it's tough. I think what we've been able to do is convince Karis that it's not a genre category and that it's a category that recognizes excellence amongst Indigenous people. And so we have, it's not perfect by any means, but we have definitely two groups, so one traditional and one contemporary.
Yeah, and Canadian is not a genre, but neither is Indigenous a genre. These are not genres. They're a racial or geographical.
Well, I also think award shows in general, we've seen them come and go. Unfortunately, I love the CAMAs. I loved Indian Summer Music Awards. I loved the APCMAs, which became the Indigenous Music Awards. Funding is a hard thing, but also just staying relevant. I think my kids would never watch a music award show. They would, and so I think it's just hard for audiences to stay engaged in what a music show is trying to do, and then also hard to find sponsors and hard to find grants to support that activity. And so I think it's still really important, but I think as a community, the music industry, we all have to come together and figure out how to keep these things relevant. With the Indigenous Music Office, we just met with the Canadian Country Music Association, who runs the Canadian Country Music Awards. And they're great people. They're really nice. But again, we're trying to help them or convince them to use their stage to show Canadians that Indigenous people are just as special with as much value as their loved ones. And so maybe looking beyond a genre category or the nomination process to shine a spotlight on Indigenous people every year. And so I think again, it's just realizing that there's a need for change and helping each other figure out what that change looks like.
Hey, just a question. Oh, hey, West Day, Serpent River, just First Nation, just here checking this out. It's awesome.
Nice.
What pathway can an emerging artist take in this new era? We have AI, we have YouTube, we have a lot of different cross-platform marketing things going on. What do you see?
Yeah, I think I still like the idea of 10,000 hours to master your craft. You're a songwriter. You should write songs every day, and you should do co-writing it as much as possible. And it is going to events like this and try to network and meet other songwriters and writing with them. And if you're an emerging songwriter, you haven't been doing it long, if you are less experienced than the person you're writing with, you should be bringing the ideas to the table. And that's something that I learned from Desiree Dorian. She does a lot of songwriting. She's a songwriter, country singer, Americana singer from Dauphin. She always tells younger folks that it's really important to bring ideas to the table, not to just show up in a songwriting session and say oh, what do you want to write today? You got to be the one that brings the ideas to the table and uses that opportunity as best as possible. And I think following the Nashville formula, and I'm not an expert on the Nashville formula. I think it's 3 hours. So you just get together and write for 3 hours, finish one song in that 3 hours. I think it's also good for co-writing to just agree to split the songwriting credit evenly, like right off the top, regardless of who writes what and what you think you contributed. I think that's just kind of the Nashville kind of formula as well. But like I said, I'm not an expert on Nashville. I've never even been to Nashville, or I've never even watched the Nashville TV show. So I think, again, it's just my only point is, like, as an emerging artist, as an artist in general, 10,000 hours to master your craft, and it's got to be songwriting every day. And then, like the AI, I remember the quote. I went to one panel and they said, "You're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by people that know how to work with AI." And so I spend about like an hour or 2 hours every morning just watching AI music videos and trying to learn like what the opportunities are, what the tools are that I can use, because it's like I said, we all got to learn how to work with AI. And YouTube, super important. You got to get your stuff on YouTube. I think, like, I don't know how the money works on YouTube, to be honest. Yeah, it's really important to get views. I always think like the basic math for Spotify is 1 million streams equals about $8,000 in royalty payments. I don't know what the basic math on YouTube is. So, but there's a lot of money to be made on YouTube, and YouTube is still the #1 streaming service worldwide because it's free and people use it around the world. So, get your music on YouTube. You can also do like a kind of a trick. You can spend about $100 on Google ads to promote your YouTube, and you'll get like a good 30,000 views real quick just off of a $100 ad spend. Just Google that. There's a little Google trick for you. Like, it's a legit ad, but it'll kind of boost your views to make it look good. But then you still need to market to your own audience so that there's actually people dropping comments and engaging. Because like a video with like 30,000 views and no comments and no likes looks very suspicious.
I have a question. I'm Dea from here, Six Nations. So like the music industry is very small, like the indigenous music industry. So if there was like a Shark Tank for the indigenous music industry, who are the 5 people that you would need to be standing in front of?
Probably Elaine Bomberry. Probably my auntie Kim Wheeler. I don't know who else. Maybe. Oh yeah, let's put Gary in there. Gary's a good guy. Gary would give everyone money, though. That's the thing. Gary never keeps things for himself. You just give everything away. I don't really know. That's the thing.
Like if there's certain organizations or funders out there who are like, you need to be on the top of their priority list in order to get noticed by the rest of Canada or the United States. Like you need to be noticed by those organizations.
You know what? I often ask a similar question when I'm in Toronto and meeting with people. I was like, how do you discover music? Who do you trust? And I haven't done this in a long while, but I remember like about 4 years ago, it kept on coming up as this one guy. He's an A&R for Dynalone. His name's Nathan Stein. And so he's always got his ear to the ground. He's always listening to new music and then connecting new musicians with teams that make the most sense. And so as in my role as a helper, I helped a songwriter out of Bella Coola named Kaylee Watts. And when we wanted to do a songwriting project with an A&R, we reached out to Nathan, and he was on board, and he was able to, as an A&R, it's artist and repertoire, it's their role to connect artists with other artists. And so he was able to curate a bunch of co-writing sessions for Kaylee, which helped her, like, I don't know, again, I think co-writing is super important. She's based in Bella Coola, and she doesn't like to leave she doesn't like travel, so we did all the co-writing sessions on Zoom. And again, I think that's a great question. I would ask that everywhere you go, like, who do you trust to recommend new music to? I think that's more important than like giving money away is discovery and curation. Yeah. So That's a great question. I should keep on asking that whenever I meet people.
So who would you normally go to and ask that? Because right now, like, there is no indigenous voice narrating music. There's no one like making those playlists. There's no one to say, hey, this is popping, this is good, this is not. It's just a lot of people, hugging and dancing.
Well, I think like it's changing now. There's a lot more interest in what indigenous people are doing in music. Like if you went to the Spotify offices here in Toronto, or in Toronto, not here, but in Toronto, and asked them, they would know who Tia Wood is. They would know who Smai is. They would know who Jeremy Dutcher is in the Hallucination. So I think it's definitely changing. But I think it's good just wherever you go, ask them who are the indigenous artists that you know and that you're listening to. Because, I think it's a great question.
Gail Obadiah, Six Nations, the Grand River here. Nice to see you again, Alan.
Yeah, good to see you.
I had a question actually about Spotify, and I didn't know that Spotify actually had a Toronto office, which you just mentioned. So maybe that would be my outlet that I go to, because I have my music on Spotify, and they made contact through me through the mail, and I can't get my royalties from Spotify because my original email that I made my account with is no longer in service, and neither was my phone number. And so then they asked me for a code, which was a US code, which I don't have on my music, and that was the only way that they would release the funds to me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
There was a code to the music that's a US code, like we have up here in Canada from SOCAN. This was a U.S. code, because they asked me for my code, and I said I don't have that one. I only have one from SOCAN. I didn't even know what they were talking about.
I don't really know. So the office here, I think, is mostly focused on the curation of the editorial playlist and some of the programming, and probably sales. But I really don't know who did.
I didn't know that Spotify had a Toronto office, so maybe I'll just try that.
Maybe,
it's Canadian, so or it's in Canada. And then that's the next question is, there's all this veto about U.S. stuff. And so what do you see happening now with the music platforms with such things like Spotify? And
I don't know. I haven't even considered that with the tariffs.
Because people are starting to not,
buy Canadian. Well, the thing, they do have a Canadian arm to what they do, their business. And recently the Canadian Telecommunications Commission, or TRTC, I can't remember what the whole acronym stands for. It's like radio communication. I can't remember. But they mandated that the streaming services like Spotify, Apple, and Amazon make Canadian content development contributions. It's the total envelope is 5% of their annual revenue. And the Indigenous Music Office has been listed as one of the eligible recipients. Our contribution would be 0.15% of annual revenue. Unfortunately, what's happened is the streaming services have won the right to appeal that decision, and so it's currently being debated in the courts. So we might not get Canadian content development contributions from the streaming services. And just as some history and context, Canadian content development contributions, or CCD contributions, have been made by the radio broadcasters for a very long time. Even like Much Music used to make CCD contributions. And so it's just giving back to Canadian creators, because you're getting the right to use our airwaves and I guess our infrastructure. And so that's what the CRTC thinks, is that the evolution of broadcasting does include the streaming services. And in my basic math, like, I don't know what they're making on an annual basis, but I'm guessing that the 0.15% would be about $750,000 a year, which sounds like a big pot of money. But if we did like $20,000 grants with that money, I think we could do like 30 or 40. So it's not a lot. If we did $10,000 grants, and $10,000 nowadays doesn't go very far. No. So I think like the even better fund that we have right now is the Canada Council for the Arts. I know that in my role as a helper, I've helped Northern Cree, I've helped Cree Confederation, I've helped Kaylee Watts get album grants. And so with that amount of money, you can pay the session musicians really well. everyone can have their opportunity costs eliminated. So you're paying for travel, you're paying for accommodations per diems for all the singers, all the musicians. And so it's I think that's where we really want to be, is to be able to pay session musicians really well, or singers, because like powwow drum groups, there's like 16 singers, and so if everyone's getting even like $300 a day for each session, that's 16 times $300. It starts to add up, and yeah, it's really it's important to pay all the artists along the chain very well. I learned during the pandemic, I saw that, you know, if you own copyright, if you own a master, if you own like a feature performer royalty, then you could still continue to earn revenue while there was no performance opportunities. Unfortunately for session musicians, they didn't own copyright, and so they didn't make any money. Same with side players for live performances, they didn't make any money. So those people are super valuable to what we do, but they're also really vulnerable. And so when you're recording, it's a really good idea to pay them as much as you can. Unfortunately, with $10,000, you can't really pay them well.
Or revamp the contract with which you work with them, you know.
Yeah,
Like,
I think it all depends on like what the market can support,
Right.
or what the funds can support.
Thank you. Lacey is online here, and she's got 3 questions. Can you give us a Formula 101 for a new artist, like what to do step by step? Someone's like, says, oh, I have like, I think I wrote an amazing few songs here. Now what?
I think you shouldn't record those first 3 songs that you write. I think you should go back and write like 30 more. I think like, yeah, it's far too often I see emerging artists write the first songs that they record, or record the first songs that they write. I think you need to go have about 60 songs to consider, and then pick the strongest 12, and then work with your producer. Like with the Canada Council grants, we were able to schedule pre-production meetings with the producers every time. And the first pre-production meeting is to just like present all the songs and go through and pick some. Second one, you work on song structure, so reorganizing the songs. If you're targeting streaming like Spotify, you want the hook right in the first 5 seconds. If you're looking at radio, it can be the first 15 seconds, so it's a little bit longer. But again, you need to consider structure, you need to consider melody, and just to continue to improve the songs so that they're strongest before you go into the recording studio. That's kind of like the second or third step. I think the first step, again, is just doing as many co-writing sessions as possible. Good music matters the most, and so you got to become a great songwriter, and you do that through putting your 10,000 hours in. Building a team is really hard too. Gary and I were talking about it on our tour of 6 Nations earlier today, and it was just like, you also want to be careful not to die by, like, you can die from exposure, you can die from a bunch of things, but you can also die from a million little cuts. And so as an artist, if you've got too many team members before you're kind of ready, all those team members taking a percentage here and there can add up, and you actually might be making less money than you were before you were performing. So it's also important to grow at a measured pace, and not to grow too fast when it comes to team members. I also tell people every team member that you bring on board is probably another 10 emails you have to answer every day. And so if you're a manager, you're answering, if you're on your own, you're answering like 5 or 10 a day. If you have a manager, you're answering another 20. So if you bring on a booking agent, you're probably answering 30 a day. If you have a publisher, it's to 40 a day. A record label, it's 50 a day. If you have teams in other countries, you could be answering even more. And I think like what I've also heard from Mauricio's podcast is just the idea that, excuse me, that the artist needs to be the CEO. And so the artist needs to be the leader of the whole business. They are the main decision maker. And so that's why it's really important for them to answer emails, to answer text messages, and not just think, I have a manager, now I can just back off and be an artist. It doesn't work like that. You got to be the one that wants it more than anyone else. And so I don't know, that's kind of like a first step. I think it's a really big question that'll get into multiple years, but
Yeah, I don't even know if there could actually be like a handbook made because it's kind of individualistic almost, and but at the same time there is avenues that one should and needs to follow. Lacey's second question, that was just her first one. How do you get to on the Toronto billboard?
Oh, with Spotify has the Indigenous playlist, and so if they ask you to curate it, then they'll put you on the billboard. Same with Amazon. I think they have an Indigenous playlist and Apple Music. And so they all spend money on that billboard space every month. And so this month it's the Hallucination on the Indigenous Spotify. And so they'll get a billboard. Northern Cree did it once. Kaylee Watts did it last week, actually. And people probably don't no idea who she is. And I think we got it because we were running ads for her latest single. And the biggest market for the ads was Toronto. So I think the Spotify people were always seeing her ads. And then they just reached out to her and said, hey, can you curate the Indigenous playlist? And so she was able to do it and got the billboard.
Cool. Thank you. And here's Lacey's third question. How do you navigate through the pretendians and gatekeep?
I think it's really important.
Gatekeepers.
Authenticity is super important, I think. Yeah, and we just, for the festival, we just did consultations with music festivals and Indigenous audience members last year in October, end of October, and all of them told us that they want us to make sure that the artists listed on our website are not pretendians, that they're Indigenous people. And so we just started a process of getting artists to update their profiles, but also like sharing their status cards, Métis cards, Inuit cards, or identifying their nations and the nations that their parents identify with as a way to verify that. It's super important. The gatekeeping is also challenging. I think what you got to do is a lot of the networking. And I think like the networking, for me, first impressions are super important. And so I always try to make a good first impression when I go to networking events. And it's feeling well prepared. I'm going to refer to Mauricio's podcast again because I just started listening to it, and I was listening to it on the way here. And the first guest he had on the series talked about how he would prepare for everything. Like he ended up doing tour management. He's now the manager of Party Next Door and Wonder Girl, and has a couple other companies, but he got his start like just creating databases of all the people in the music industry. He also set up Twitter notifications for any time that the people that he wanted to work with tweeted, just in case they said, hey, I need an intern. So he would receive that message on his phone. And so I think it's just like doing all the research, being prepared for opportunities, and making good first impressions. That's super important for all the gatekeepers. And I still encounter a lot of that too. There's a lot of gatekeepers at every level of your career. And so again, for me, it's about making sure that I'm being super nice, that I'm being well prepared and professional. And like last week, I had a chance to meet with a number of the Canadian Heritage people. And I've been pitching the idea of the importance of recognizing competition prize money as an eligible expense for Canadian Heritage since 2006. And I continue to make that pitch last week to everyone I met at Canadian Heritage too, because it's super important. There's no reason why the folk community and the country music community and rock community can have nationwide networks of publicly supported festivals, but we can't. And I'm a big fan of the two-row wampum belt, and I often reference that in my meetings. The idea, I oversimplify the idea, obviously. I don't share the whole story or the teachings, but I share with them the idea that Indigenous people are one row, our relatives from overseas, the Canadians are another row, and both rows have equity-deserving groups. Indigenous people are not an equity-deserving group in the Canadian row. And so, like, we are one of the main pillars. We deserve our own programs and supports. And just because they recognize competition prize money for powwows and Indigenous people doesn't mean they have to open it up to anybody else in Canada. They don't have to make competition prize money an eligible expense. So you won't have publicly supported karaoke competitions. You'll just have a nationwide network of publicly supported powwows.
All right. I have two questions. Sego. Oh, Sego, it's Samaya. Hi, Alan.
Hi.
So the first question is, so I'm gearing up for my new EP release called Lover Girl. But I equally love doing film and I also love doing music, but I find it's really hard to find funding for music videos. So I was wondering, how could I propose that through a grant, because it doesn't seem like it's an eligible expense, and like for Factor, it's kind of hard if you're not that certain artist profile ranking yet to do those kinds of projects.
I think the main source would be Canada Council Creating, Knowing, and Sharing. It's short-term projects is up to $100,000, and so like Northern Cree, we got a visual package supported through Canada Council. My experience, the more Indigenous people you have on the project, the stronger the application is. It isn't a part of the scoring rubric or scoring formula, but maybe it is. It's just like on the third tab of the budget form, it says list all your team members and identify if they're Indigenous or not, but also how much they're going to make. And I think for juries, and I've been on some juries, I think, maybe not that program, and maybe not Canada Council. I don't think you're allowed to say you're in a jury. So I wasn't on a jury, but it's really, I think it does influence how the jury scores your project if you have like mostly Indigenous people. I think the gender parity is super important. So having Indigenous women in very important roles is really important as well. And so I would pitch it to them. I would also like pitch it twice in the year, because one jury might not support it, whereas the second jury could. And so if there's, I don't even know what the deadlines are anymore. Yeah,
I think the next one's April 7th or 9th.
Yeah. So pitch it to that, or apply to that one, apply again in June or September, like can apply twice. And I think with your EP too, you got to make the decision, like, do you want to focus on the money, or do you want to focus on audience development? Because I think those are, right now, they're kind of separate. If you focus on the money, I think it makes sense to release one single every 3 or 4 months and target SiriusXM. Because SiriusXM, like one song on there, the basic math that I always kind of pitch is about 30,000 US in royalties from SiriusXM for one song. And so I think like if you did like 3 singles in a year, that could be up to 90,000 US in royalties if it gets picked up by SiriusXM. So but that's kind of counterintuitive to what Spotify wants. Spotify wants like regular releases, so like one every month, or one every 2 weeks. And and again, like you could build a bigger audience on Spotify through doing that, because I don't think like, I'm not too sure if channel 165 gets picked up in the car. I think it's just on the app right now. So there's not a lot of audience that's being reached, but there's a lot of money to be made. So I think those are the decisions you have to make. Do I want to build an audience, or do I want to like maximize the amount of money I'm going to make from the recording right now?
Awesome. That's great. Thank you. Yeah. And then the second question I had is, so through the J Treaty, we are able to work and live in the U.S. And so I have like a U.S. social security number and I have a Canadian one. Nice. So then, I release my music through DistroKid and I have to sign a W-8BEN form. And there's nothing through that website that really says that, I'm also like a U.S. quote unquote citizen. So I'm wondering like, how do I file my taxes? And it's hard to find somebody that would know how to. Yeah, you just got to find an accountant here in Canada that can do cross-border taxes. And so they would file for you here and they would file in the US. And I think like for SiriusXM, if you go through Sound Exchange for the collection of your royalties, there is language to include in the W-8BEN that says royalties are subject to a 0% withholding tax. And so you'll get 100% of your royalties, as opposed to I think withholding tax in the US is 28%. And so if you don't include that one line in your W-8BEN, then Sound Exchange will withhold the 28%. I guess my point is find an accountant here in Canada that can do cross-border taxes. Do you have any suggestions of which firm?
No, and it's so you can do an accountant, or you can have like a business manager, and the business managers, like I know William Prince has one, Don Romero has one, and I think they're both based here. I think Garrett T. Willie has one now, and I think it is a little more expensive. I would say like you'd budget about $2,000 a month to have a business manager. And they would handle your taxes at the end of the year. They also do all your payments and in invoicing. And so I know when you sign with like a larger management firm, they're going to want you to have a business manager, because the business managers, I think, are oath bound to pay every invoice that comes in. And so let's say that you have a manager and you part ways with that manager. So, and there's a dispute on like the sunset clause or whatever, the payments that the manager thinks they're owed. If they submit that invoice to your business manager, it's kind of a safeguard for that manager, because that business manager has to pay it if there's an agreement in place. And so I think that's just overly complicating things. Oh, we got. But yeah, I think managers are great members to have on board. Hey, it's Brenton. Were you texting me, Brenton?
Yeah, I did text you, yeah.
So Brenton's a member. Yeah, Brenton's the program manager with the Indigenous Music Office. He's based in Selkirk?
Selkirk, Manitoba, that's right.
Yeah, so he's north of Winnipeg. Yeah, so I guess we'll talk about the Indigenous Music Office now. Is that right? What do you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, let's hear about the incoming, the possibility of funds coming in, what you're going to do with them. And possibly the info sessions that you guys have been hosting online from people all across our nations that are, kind of feeding you ideas as to, what you can do with that bit of money that's coming in from the CTRC. And so on and so forth. What do you guys got cooking over there?
Yeah, the fund, the potential of a fund is really important. I think we've been fighting for that for a very long time. The idea that Indigenous people should have input on the money that's available for the arts and for music in Canada, super important. We've seen a lot of success with the Indigenous Screen Office and the funds that they manage now, and so we want the ability to dictate how the money is spent, how the application process is run, and how we support the arts. And so one of the biggest tasks we've been given, I guess we've given ourselves, is listening to people across the music industry and figuring out what the priorities are for the fund and how people apply and access the money. And so that's what I want to talk about. I think to back things up, maybe we can ask Brenton to explain how just give us some background on the Cultural Cadence program that you're running right now, too.
Yeah, sure. So the Cultural Cadence program is our first program that the IMO has put together, and it's essentially a mentorship program for industry people. So not necessarily musicians and artists, but Indigenous people that want to work in the music industry. And so what we've identified is that one of the biggest gaps that our community sees is those people. We have people that are making just fantastic art across the board, but we're lacking a lot of the infrastructure around that. So this program, the Cultural Cadence Mentorship Program, is really designed to address that. And what we've done is we've selected 10 people from across the country, and we've paired them with experienced people in their field, so they can help. They can learn about the music industry and hopefully sharpen their skills virtually online. So that's been happening, and it is happening right now. And then the week before the Junos, so at the last week of March, we're taking everybody to Vancouver, where we'll have a week of professional development. So we are bringing in speakers, and we're going to networking events and going to the award show and doing all the introductions that need to take place with these people, and the introductions that are really important for success in the music industry, and hopefully making some of those and facilitating some of that as we move forward. So that's it's all in motion right now, and we're just finalizing all the plans for our conference in Vancouver.
We're just checking to see if there's any questions for the Indigenous Music Office or anything else that you'd like to share that you guys are up to.
We got a lot going on, and actually we have, I just started getting more involved because our chairperson, Leela Gilday, is stepping down. And so next week is our AGM, and so I volunteered to fill the chairperson role, so I figured it's a good idea to figure out what the organization is actually doing and how I can support Brenton and Bonita, who are working with the IMO. And so, yeah, we've been doing a lot more now. And like I mentioned earlier, like we met with the CCMAs. And what's happening is now that there's an Indigenous Music Office, and our predecessor was actually the National Aboriginal Recording Industry Association, or NARIA, and it was an organization that Curtis Johnny ran. Shingoose ran it, and I remember Cheryl Siwa Pegaham was involved. Asani, they did a couple of the showcases with NARIA. NARIA had a booth and a showcase at the Camas one year, and so it was in the early 2000s, and so I had the privilege of living through that time and seeing what they were doing and learning from the lessons that they shared with us and their experience. And unfortunately, at the time, it was before the reconciliation movement, and so there was a lot less interest in supporting Indigenous people. Whereas now, I think we have a lot more opportunities, and definitely with this CRTC ruling, hopefully, again, the streaming services are asked to make the CCD contributions, and we'll have a lot more support. We've also been talking to Canadian Heritage about having a fund similar to the ISO. So the streaming services CCD money would be one part of the fund, and hopefully a larger contribution from Canadian Heritage would make up a bigger pot of money. But again, like what we need to decide as a community is like, what are our priorities for this fund? What do you guys need money for? And what does the application process look like? Because I'm also like, the thing that I've learned through like the great support we receive from Canada Council is that there's tax implications for those grants. And so let's say you get $80,000 for your album. If that goes to you personally, you're also going to get a tax receipt for that in that calendar year. And so you're going to be on the hook for potentially a lot of money. And so how do we minimize the tax burden of these grants too? I think that's another question that we have to answer.
Yeah, when we're on reserve, we don't necessarily have that issue, but at the same time, I believe Canada Council is allowing people to build in a budget line for tax payments on anything that you may receive from Canada Council. So they understand that, you know, if they're paying out $100,000 or close to $100,000, or even if you are successful in receiving the long-term award, that's to get up to $300,000. And I know our collective did receive that one year, and that the tax burden was incredible. Because I wasn't managing, I wasn't on reserve at the time, and it was just incredible for our collective. Like we had to just freaking pay, you know.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to have an office on the Urban Reserve in Winnipeg, so I keep track of all the time I spend on reserve.
But do they recognize that, like an urban reserve?
Yeah,
they do.
Yeah, definitely the urban reserve and just regular reserve. Okay. But you have to have First Nation status to take advantage of that. And so there's a lot of Métis and Inuit folks that probably don't have that opportunity. Okay. And so again, like that's one of the concerns that I have is how do we administer this fund in a way that doesn't create such an incredible tax burden. Yeah. And one of the things that like I also want us as a community to consider is finding out a way to support session musicians and side players as well. Because again, for the most part, we see a lot of these grants going to artists, front people, or people operating under their own names, who are better at filling out applications, who are more academically inclined. And like I said, sometimes we forget to support our session musicians who are focusing on the music to make us look good. And like I said earlier, they're some of the most vulnerable people when it comes to hard times because they don't own the copyright. And so how do we find a way to support them as well?
I like the idea of heritage funds getting kind of filtered into our needs as industry people, but also as musicians. And one of the things I would love to see is now we're very, very fortunate on Six Nations to actually have 3 choices in terms of recording choices. We can go here, we can come to Red Door here, which is like being a gracious host here at Through the Red Door, Gary Joseph, and also there's of course the Jukasa, which is the big multi-million whatever it is, recording studio, and mixing place, and then also Derek Miller has opened his recording studio, which is Silver Hills Records. So we are very fortunate in that regard. But I still would love to see heritage funds support those kind of like community-based recording centers, or even heritage money that can support the creation of this kind of co-op, if you will, where you guys, we look to you guys in Winnipeg. I don't know, I'm speaking for myself here, but I see all the work that gets done in Winnipeg in terms of supporting your Indigenous artists over there. And like, we can totally do that here. We just haven't come around to doing it, but we're starting, and this is day one. This is day one of that.
I think, like here, working on reserve, you can, if you're First Nation, you have the ability to mitigate some of those tax burdens. But I think like also setting up nonprofits is super helpful. They are taxed at you basically just have to submit your GST and your annual filings or your annual returns, and so it's a lot easier. I think I'm really interested to hear other ideas, like the supporting of the recording studios is one. What are other things that you guys want support with? That's Maya.
Okay, I have another question. So speaking to like the tax burden, and I also said that I'm like interested in film as well. So I was looking at the Indigenous Screening Office, the opportunities there for the Indigenous sector development, I believe it was, and that you needed to have like either a sole proprietorship or an Indigenous-owned film company. So I made my own company now, and then something here that we have is you can register your business with Six Nations and be seen as like an Indigenous company. So that's I have awesome. My home office here, and I got my business number today, so that's so
nice.
Cool.
That's awesome.
So I just I'm going to be applying for those film grants, like the 3-year-long one, the short-term one, and the ISO. So I'm just wondering, in order to, because they said that like I would be liable for those tax funds as a company, but if I'm registered on reserve, like I'm wondering, is there any loopholes to that?
Well, if you have First Nation status, then you and 90% of your work is on reserve, then it would be, I think, 0% income tax. Okay. I think you still have to pay the EI, like employment insurance and CPP, which are like, I think 11% is EI or CPP. I can't remember the exact percentages. But like I said, what I do is I keep track of all the time I spend on reserve each year. And I'm averaging about 80 to 85% on reserve, because there are sometimes when I have to go to Toronto or I go to Calgary or whatever for a week. And so those weeks eat away from my time on reserve. Same with you, like when you're performing off reserve, then that's time spent off reserve. I don't know. You would have to talk to your accountant. I don't know if like the travel time would count as your business time too. I'm not too sure. I don't count the travel time between my home and my office on the urban reserve as work time. I just count the actual time I'm physically there as my work time. So again, I think you would need to start keeping track of all your hours spent on reserve and all your hours spent off reserve. So you come up with that percentage at the end of the year. And so if it's 85%, then you do pay some taxes. If you can reach 90% on reserve, then I think you don't pay like the federal income tax. But I shouldn't be giving tax advice. I'm not a tax expert. So
yeah. I've heard about them.
Yeah,
as well.
This is just kind of anecdotal.
Yeah.
And theoretical, but yeah.
I was just going to say that too, because I work on reserve my regular job, and Albert Group told me as long as you're 50% working on reserve, you're completely tax deductible.
Yeah,
so if you can figure out your work being at least 50% on reserve, then you're tax deductible.
Yeah, my
Yeah,
counted.
go there.
I think they just told me 90%. So again, I'm averaging around 82 to 85% a year, so I still pay taxes.
I have a question. Like this might go into kind of like Samai's question, like with the film and stuff like that. But is there like any type of funding out there specifically to make music with the intent for film?
Oh, like composition for film and television.
Yes, or like so
Yeah.
like you're gonna make a sitcom, you need to make the intro
Yeah.
for it.
So unfortunately in Canada, like I don't think there's a lot of money to be made in composition for film and television. Like any given film is probably budgeting like 10, 15,000 for the whole film score. So it's not a lot of money. That being said, I know there's a lot of people that are doing it. Like Jason Burnstick does a lot of composition for film and television. He might tell you that it's more than what I'm estimating. So does Chris Dirksen. And so like I think, again, I'm a big fan of the idea of 10,000 hours to master your craft. And so if you're always composing, you're always doing scoring, then I think it is a viable option. And I also tell people, like, just because everyone else is doing performances as a part of their career in the music industry doesn't mean that you have to too. Like, you can focus on composition for film and television. You can focus on songwriting. You can focus on recording and releasing to radio. Like, pick the ones that you love the most. You don't have to do all of them just to have a career.
Thank you. I just wanted to say one more thing about that. So, and I also give Brenton an opportunity to add anything if you wanted, and then we're going to pass the mic to Santi. But on the idea of writing, composing music for television or film, that's syncing. No, like that's part of the syncing. That's where you make your money, is when the compositions get picked up and utilized in film or television. Then you have a syncing contract. Yeah, but there's someone in community, Adrian Harjo, who does exactly that. He creates a lot of beats, and I've hired him to write show intros and this sort of thing. So and that's how he makes his money. He's very, very schooled and knowledgeable about registering music as well and publishing and things. I really wish he had come here today. And I'm throwing his name out there, but maybe we'll in our attempt to meet again, we'll have a session with him in particular. But if there's anything that you wanted to add, Brenton, and then we're going to throw it over to Santi.
Yeah, I don't really have too much extra to add. I've done lots of my fair share of recording, and I actually took an incubator, like kind of mini course on creating music for film, and I just want to reiterate Alan's point that it's tricky and it's different than just writing a song that you might write for radio. And so I think spending your time, if you do want to kind of pick disciplines a little bit, because the skill set is very different, and your workflow, if you're working at like on a DAW in your office and you're composing and you're working lots with MIDI for film, like it's very different than trying to write like a song for Sirius XM, say. And so kind of deciding which lane you want to be in, I think is important, and building your skill set towards something I think is really valuable, and trying to make those decisions. Anyhow, that's all I wanted to add.
I'm also going to say, like, when you get an offer or interest from a music supervisor to sync your song for a film or a television program, I have no idea what to quote. So oftentimes I'll just text other people. I'll text like Guillaume or Mauricio and ask them, hey, what did you guys get for this last project with CBC or CTV? Did you guys do any work with this film? What are the sync fees that they're offering? And the synchronization licensing is two parts. The first part is the master recording. The second part is the composition. And usually they pay the same amount for both. So if it's in Canada, you might get $1,000 for the master and $1,000 for the composition for something on CBC. So it's a longer process, but they also need you to turn it around really quickly, the music supervisors.
Mine's not really a question, but I know the thing of spaces came up, and there's Canadian Heritage Cultural Spaces Fund. That's another pot of money that helps your space costs. So I'm looking into that for my space, and you can apply. There's no deadline. But you have to have this sort of communication with Canadian Heritage on the space, and they'll cover a certain amount of expenses for your site or whatever you have.
Do you know what the percentage that they'll cover?
I think it says, I was just Googling it because I wanted to know what I was saying. It says 50% of total eligible project costs.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, like if you, like my space, I want to renovate it because it's not really winterized. So if I want to put a new roof or I want to do something to like develop the space, but it's not a capital fund. It's for something that you already, your project for your space. Yeah. And then I just wanted to make a comment too, now that I have the mic, is that I really think when I think about the industry side of things, that it's trying to cultivate all levels of industry, like you were mentioning, like the sound engineers, the sound designers, and even in the performing arts, we're always looking to collaborate with Indigenous artists and make our industry really strong and diverse. So that's another component about all of the aspects of industry that can be jobs for people.
Yeah, definitely. I think our main goal with the Indigenous Music Office is to help more Indigenous people make music their full-time job. And in the powwow, that's what I've been pitching with powwow, is we do that by having a nationwide network of publicly supported powwows, because for one drum group to win like first place at a competition powwow, that might be $20,000 split between 15 singers. And so they're taking home $1,200 from that one event. To make ends meet for a family nowadays that has like childcare, they're probably looking at needing to win 4 competition powwows every month. And so, I think we have a long way to go in providing a living wage for powwow singers, traditional singers in general, and dancers.
So how would you recommend to get your music to music supervisors for like sync placements? And I know that there's some people I've met that they get what's it called? Like prompts from music supervisors for sync. I just don't know how to get on those like newsletters or like email lists.
There is, yeah. I think like I would kind of maintain ownership of your copyright. So that includes the master recording and the composition. That being said, like the publishers are the ones that are pitching to music supervisors oftentimes. And I did a number of meetings in LA with publishers and music supervisors before the pandemic. And I always asked them like how does this process work? How are you getting in front of these larger music supervisors? And for the publishers that were down there, they were talking about they have consultants that they hire to introduce them to new and emerging directors, because oftentimes the directors will exercise a lot of influence over the music supervisors and tell them, this is the song that I envisioned for this scene. Can you go and get it for me? I think so the music publishers play a big role. That being said, I was listening to that podcast again, and they were saying how some of the more established music producers that are music composers who are mentoring younger folks are telling them to wait until they have like a couple of big hits, big songs. Because if you go sign with the music publishers and you don't have a lot of track record, then the advance you get from the music publisher is really small. But say that you've written a couple of songs for Rihanna, or you've done some work with Dua Lipa, and then you have this track record. And so you as a songwriter, you have more value, and so they're going to give you a larger advance. And then once you're on their roster, they're going to be pitching your work to music supervisors. So that's like the next steps. I guess like as a self-represented artist, you could also purchase a subscription for disco.ac. And disco.ac is the platform that all the music supervisors, I guess 90% of music supervisors use to discover new music and then keep track of it for their projects. So I have a disco.ac account which I have like Northern Cree's album on, Kaylee Watts' unreleased album on, and I ticked off the option to make it in discovery mode. And so all the songs have tabs or tags for the genre, the tempo, the type like solo, female, or powwow. We have all the lyrics in there, all the songwriting credits. And so when like a music supervisor is looking for a song that sounds similar to, let's say that they can't afford a Blue Rodeo song or a Rolling Stone song, the AI in Disco now will recommend a bunch of songs that sound similar. And so if you have your stuff on disco.ac, it makes it more easy for music supervisors to find you. It's about $200 a year, I think.
Okay. So I know you mentioned like the releasing singles approach versus like an EP approach. But what I've seen too is that some people are like releasing a few singles that are a part of their bigger album project. I don't know, how do you do that through DistroKid? Like, is there a way to submit something like 2 singles or something, and then it becomes this EP project?
Yep. So you need to assign your ISRC code. So the ISRC is something that you register with Music Connect Canada, I think it's called. Just Google it, ISRC Canada. And so you maintain that yourself. And then when you upload it to DistroKid, you include the song title, the ISRC. You can get DistroKid to assign the UPC. But the ISRC is how the system puts your singles. So you have 1, 2 released, and then you have the EP. It'll make those singles join the EP when you release the EP.
Okay.
So it's the ISRC.
Okay.
Yeah,
awesome.
DistroKid will assign an ISRC when you put out the single for the first time, and then you just have to make sure you use the same number when you release your bigger project at the end, so that those two compositions are connected, that they're both seen as the same thing.
I just force people to create their own ISRC, and you keep track of it. So like when you assign it's just like assigning a song title. You assign the ISRC, and you follow the instructions that Music Connect Canada provides you. I don't know if it's Music Connect Canada or something else, but just Google ISRC Canada. And so you'll get like your 2 letters and then your number, and then you assign the last numbers to every song. So just remember, the ISRC is how the system puts your singles into your album.
All right.
I hope you don't mind. I'm going to see if Gary, did you have anything that you want to add to the conversation? Okay, Gary says no. So listen, I just wanted to add something here, and I don't think Brenton knows about this, but or maybe he does, because I've been sending reports to Brenton through the Cultural Cadence. But I wanted people to know what's coming up around this area. And last fall, we had wonderful community meetings with the artists, and we were talking to a lot of people of what they thought was needed here in Six Nations in terms of supporting the arts. And Jesse Wente, who is this amazing cultural commentator, I guess you could say, was joining that meeting. And something that he said that really, really struck with me is he said, it's important that we build from within. And so I take that idea, the concept of building from within, and applying it to the project that I'm working with through the Cultural Cadence program, which is this. So in the summer of this year, August, I am going to produce a Indigenous music video pitch competition. And that will be for local artists. Local is defined by 30-kilometer radius. And we will strike a committee that will receive the submissions. And ideally, we're looking for musicians, local Indigenous musicians who have a bit of experience in terms of their studio experience and their performing experience, but no one who's like of the professional level, like really emerging, I suppose. And we're going to create through the committee. They will select a short list of those submissions, and then we will have a live pitch competition. So the musicians will have to articulate their vision for a music video, and then they get to play their song that they're pitching the video for live. They get to play that song live in front of a live audience, and then we will select a winner, and that winner will receive professional studio time from within the community here, and they will have their music video produced professionally from production houses here in community as well. And then we will the mentorship that will go along with that will include things like, how do I register this song, how do I distribute the song, and that sort of thing, and like, kind of business professional tips and tricks and things like that. So that's coming up. You'll probably hear about and Seeing Red Media is helping with that, because we have a little agreement in writing, well, kind of a handshake agreement in writing, that they will come on board. So yeah, Ray Smith is here from Seeing Red Media, and I'm very happy. And then, of course, our friends over here at Through the Red Door are going to be on board with that as well. So thank you, Gary Joseph. He's smiling at me, which means I'm in. So look for that. The call out for that will be in around May, and then, like I said, the pitch competition itself will come up in August. So how do you like them apples there?
That's awesome.
Yeah. We can say to Brenton, because I'm not sure if you knew about that. What we were
Yeah,
and I'm getting the great. Yeah,
sounds amazing.
Yeah, I'm getting all the great mentorship with through Alan to kind of produce this event in the best way possible. So thank you, Alan. And thanks for letting me have this time to kind of talk about that.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I still want ideas for this fund. Like, what are the? I do have the two main questions that I just pitched on our Slack channel was, and it might not be easiest since we're like on record right now, but if you guys have any other ideas, like priorities that we should be considering with this new fund, I think I'd love to hear them.
Have you guys reached out to any school boards yet?
No.
So like I used to mentor for this program from 2019, 2022, 23. It was called Artworks, and it was out of Quebec. And basically they had the Cree School Board, which was all of
Oh yeah, they got lots of money.
A lot of money, right? So I tried to bring that program to Six Nations. It didn't work out. But
not as much money as the Quebec folks.
Oh, I think we got it, but So anyways, but yeah, I'm thinking that a program like that needs to come to Six Nations, because I seen what they did with all the Cree schools and all like that, and they really got on board. And they were able to basically have performances, beat making workshops. There was so much that we were able to do and stuff like that. And they were doing residencies. So you were able to go way up north and do that. Now, I'm not saying we have to do that here, because we're in a very, we're close to Toronto, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm just wondering if if you guys, or what you guys are doing, would have any funding for that type of age category.
That makes, it does seem like it's a funding gap in the existing landscape, because I know the arts councils and probably Factor and other funding agencies won't support kids that are in school, because the idea is that when you're in school, you're not a professional artist, because you're a professional student. And so that probably is a gap that we might be able to address. So it's a great idea. Thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, I think a lot of the ways that they were trying to, they maneuvered around that was mentorship, it was mental health, it was the fact that, a lot of these people didn't have access to the resources, so they brought it to them. And I think the same thing applies to here. It's just that, we do have a little bit more resources, but we still have a mental health issues within the community, and music and art can be the platform to get it out. So
yeah,
I still feel that it's needed.
Yeah, I fully on board. I believe that when you're struggling with mental health, you're struggling with the ability to communicate your feelings, and the arts gives you that outlet. So I get it. I get what you're saying. It's awesome.
But yeah, it'd just be cool to reach out to the school boards and stuff.
Yeah. Make sure they get some money too, eh? That's the hard thing, is the money part, and it just seems like in Quebec they have so much money for the arts. It's just, yeah.
Maybe on that note too, I don't know if you're aware that the libraries, I'm such a fan of libraries. I love public libraries. They're the greatest social experiment ever. They're just amazing. And recently, so there are a lot more libraries in the cities. They have little recording booths. I don't know if you knew that. So you can go in for free. Anybody can go in for free. It's like a little narration booth, eh? And, with this, they're set up with a little recording program, and of course the equipment is there. And I'm wondering if maybe some of the funds that you guys are going to be managing soon could support something like that. Like we have a library here on Six Nations, but it doesn't have to necessarily exist in a library. But someone who's, to support an artist that not necessarily is ready to go into a recording scenario, like a professional recording scenario, and they don't have the equipment at home. Maybe like a open community recording booth of some sort. Maybe something like that.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting too. Yeah, I think just the entry, like a great entry point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I know it's probably happened already, but connecting with the global Indigenous music markets. So I know in the performing arts before COVID, there was a lot of, called them the Tri-Nations, which was Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. And there's also Sami is becoming very, producing a lot of amazing music, actually. And Indigenous Taiwan is huge music, and we do collaborations with Taiwanese artists as well. In Japan and also Mongolia, so there's this sort of global network.
I also like Mexico.
Mexico, the warm places.
Yeah.
Hawaii. So I know that's it's always inspiring to be able to come together and learn what other people are doing, shared experiences, but also shared knowledge. So maybe that's something that could be funded in some way.
Yeah, I think we do have opportunities like that now. With the International Indigenous Music Summit, I know there's a lot of people that come here to Toronto, but also, there is money and funding if you are going to New Zealand to tour or even just doing conferences out there, there's opportunities. I think the showcases usually are the triggers to access that support, but there's a lot of I think there's a lot of value in collaborating with Indigenous people from other parts of the world, because our experience with colonizations is kind of the ties that bind us, and also the things that we're working to overcome.
One other thing is showcases. So you mentioned the Indigenous Music Summit, but there's many different showcases that are happening for arts. So there's Kapakoa, in Canada, there's Kapakoa, all Ontario Contact East, or Contact East, Pacific Contact. And when I go to these things, there's always music producers or music agencies. And there's very few Indigenous artists spread between all of these, like Tanya Tagak's on one and Susan Aglicart's on another one. But, there's everybody sort of individually. But I know showcasing and doing a really great showcase is one step to getting that important exposure. Because a lot of times people will say, oh, well, we don't, know what your show is like. But if you do a really amazing showcase, it just people start booking you.
Yeah.
So those showcase opportunities are really important. There's APAP in New York City, but now they're all over the place.
I really started to dig into that idea. We're currently our festival is running an online alternative to showcasing. Because for one band to go to APAP in New York, you're probably spending about $8,000. And so it can be overwhelming financially for some folks. And the idea is that you need to do a showcase in every country that you want to work in. And so you could be looking at a showcase at the Great Escape in the UK. You could be doing Reeperbahn in Germany. You could be doing FimPro in Mexico. And so those are three markets that you're trying to do business in, you're trying to tour and perform in. 3 times $8,000 is what, $24,000 you're looking at spending. There's funding for that, but I think Canada Council might give you $4,000 for each of them, so you're still on the hook for $4,000. I'm also I really like the idea of going to these conferences before you have a showcase. So just going on your own or going with a manager to check out how everyone's presenting themselves, what all the networking events are, so that you know which ones to target. And then also talking to some of the people that are there and asking them, how far in advance are you setting up meetings? Are you just waiting to get on site and seeing who's there and then asking for meetings? Or are you like setting up meetings 2 or 3 months, 2 or 3 weeks in advance? How are you setting up these meetings? And what are the kind of the key events? Like at APAP for music, the main event is called Global Fest. And I remember A Tribe Called Red, when they were just starting out, they weren't getting a lot of festival bookings. And so they were lucky enough to win over a showcase at APAP. And they were in the basement, and the basement venue is not much bigger than this room. But they added 2 dancers. There was 2 Dock Stater ladies that danced for them at their show. I can't remember what their first names was, mother and daughter. And that was really the turning point for them, because there was a lot of great, really influential music festivals that were there. And so they saw that, you know what, this makes more sense for my audience now. Because up until that point, the festivals were like, you know what, DJs don't really work for our festival. We're programming like hour-long performances, hour-long sets. Our audiences aren't going to get this. And so when they did that, excuse me, with the live dancer, that was really the turning point that I saw. And the following summer, they got a number of really great performances. I think they also got their booking agent overseas. And so these showcases, not only an opportunity to win over performances, but also booking agents in other markets. And what you have to do is your research. So again, going to that event before you have a showcase, figuring out what the key steps are, what the more influential events are. I also think for conferences, there's stages. And so if you can only sell 100 tickets in your home territory, probably shouldn't be going to APAP. You should probably go to like a Contact event, or go to like Breakout West, or, you know, Folk Music Ontario. If you can sell 500 tickets, then maybe you consider Canadian Music Week, or what's it called again? Departure? Departure. Yeah. If you can do 750 to 1,000 tickets, then maybe you go to South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, or you go to the Great Escape in Brighton, or you go to Reeperbahn in Germany. But it's like, if you can't sell 100 tickets, then I don't think there's a lot of value in you trying to showcase and build opportunities outside of your home territory. So I think you got to build the show here. And again, just referring to A Tribe Called Red, that's what I saw with them. They built such a great event and such a great audience in Ottawa, and that's why like people started to book them after that, because they saw the momentum.
Stay employed. So we're heading towards our time here. It's 7:15, and we just want to give Brenton one last say, since you're visiting us from the Treaty One. If there's anything else that you want to add, Brenton, before we shut her down.
Most experiences in country music, like before I was with the IMO, I was a side musician, and I still am. I still do lots of that type of work. But I think what Alan is saying is really true. Like one of the conferences that I have the most experience at was a Canadian Country Musical, the CCMAs, and like I can't overstate like how long you have to go to start meeting these people. You realize when you start going to some of these conferences that the people there that are booking festivals, the people there that are working for radio stations, they go to that conference every year, and they have been for a long time. And if you're the new kid on the block trying to promote your own music and trying to make a headway for your own act, like you have to realize that it probably doesn't happen in 1 year. And in order to meet all these people and for you to be a recognizable face in these industries, like you got to plan to go back again and again and again. And then, like Alan's saying, you got to go meet people and be a face on the scene before you start applying to showcase. And then when you do get that opportunity to perform, make sure you're positioned to make the most of it. And, that might require bring a bigger band or spending the money to bring pieces that you need to put on the best show possible. But that's just what I've seen in country music, but I think it really applies to all conferences, where it's not you're going to go to the conference one time and then make a contact and your career to blow up. You should be thinking, how do I set myself up to have a sustainable project and be able to come here again and again and again, and then maybe 5 to 10 years down the line, I'll be in a good position to take advantage of the relationships that you build over the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like being an ally. You got to keep going back before you're accepted into these kind of communities. And I do want to work. I'm going to give you the last word, Alan, but I do want to just say, Alan's come here on his own dime, eh? Like That's so generous.
Well, it's
This
because
is-
my wife can afford.
Well, and the wife. Okay. And the wife. She has the miles, the air miles to bring him in. But he went to the trouble, renting a car and driving out to be with us this afternoon. So, really, Nyamagoa, thank you so much, Alan.
Oh.
We love to see you in person. I'm really enjoying working with Alan again with this Cultural Cadence program, as Alan's my mentor. But last words from you.
Oh, I think Samaya had a question.
Oh, Smile's question. Last question.
So I'm wondering, because you're saying that you should try and sell out about 100 tickets, when you're first starting out. So I guess in a few months I'll be doing a mini tour in BC for venues that are 50 to 80. You
That's
know what I
great,
mean?
yeah.
Do you have any recommendations on how to market? I mean, I have a small audience there, but how do I reach people in that area? And I got some help, but just any advice when it comes to that and breaking even.
I think the meta ads, if you can start them now, the longer you can run those meta ads, the more the machine learns who's responding and who it should serve those ads to. So I would just do $2 a day for 2 months if you can, if you have that runway. But also just getting your friends in the area to be your street team. And I think it's just a small venue with a packed room is way better than a big venue with few people there. You just want that energy. And then if you can afford for some of the venues that are going to be packed, bring a videographer or a social media person to capture those moments. Music festivals, people like me, we're always watching what you're doing online. Your music video is so cute, it's so awesome. I love the swords and then the mountains and stuff. And so what we're in is a business of perception. Your performance fees, the offers that we send you, are based on how we perceive your value. And so the more energy that's in your rooms and in your shows, the more we're going to think you're worth and the more we're going to offer you. So that's where some festivals though aren't going to send offers. They're going to say, hey, what do you want to perform? And so I'm not a big fan of that approach. I think already as a festival producer, there's a power imbalance. And so I'll send you as much as I can afford. Some festivals will say, hey, we'd love to have you at our festival. What is your fee? And so I always feel that puts you in such a vulnerable position because you don't want to over quote. And then they're oh, this artist has no idea they're being ridiculous. And I just think, I guess my point is perception is really important. And so market it, get as much support, build a little street team, and and then see if you can document that too.
Cool. Yeah. My next music video is going to be a res love story from Six
Oh, that's
Nations with featuring hunting and fishing vibes.
Nice.
So
Well,
that's up next.
I can't remember what song it is though. You have one song that's got such cute, cool LA vibes too. I added it to one of our playlists, but I still like Insecure, which is the Issa Rae show on HBO, and it's got one of those LA vibes to it. It's you got a lot of your tracks are really good vibes. So
Did you see what Asanabi's doing with his tour?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's adding local openers.
Yeah.
Which to me is so smart because that's what's going to get your local crowd in.
Well, and I think he's doing a lot of social media with it, which is great. I know that William Prince did that too with his tour, his Canadian tour, and he had I don't know how many people are in Massey Hall, but he had Wyatt C. Lewis opening for him, using his platform to shine a spotlight on new and emerging folks. I think is just such a nice thing to do, and it's just being a good community member, and that's what Asanabi is doing too. He's just a good kid, and that's why I think. That's why I always try to if I help a younger artist, then I try to explain to them that when you get to a more established level, I expect you to do the same thing for others. I expect you to give this back, and so I think it's nice when it actually works.
There's no more questions or comments from online. Lacey says Nyawagoa. And yeah, we're just really, really grateful for you coming out, Alan. Thank you, Brenton, for joining us online. You know, again, you know, part of your job, but still, it's so nice that you took the time to be with us. We appreciate that. And thanks everyone for coming out here this evening too. We have lots of soup and bannock left over, so
Yeah, we got
please,
good soup.
yeah, eat up. And it's cold out there, so eat up. Get some nice hot soup in your belly. And everyone, you know, safe travels back home. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you, Red Door. Woo.
Gary. Yeah, Gary was about 68 years old when I first met him in the early 2000s. All right, Bradenton, we're signing off.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
See you later.